First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I feel so excited about being back at Monache. I taught here for 25 years and love this school. I'm going to talk about my book, but before I do, I want to talk to you. And what I want to talk to you about is to encourage you to follow your dreams. Because this is very, very important. I'm still in touch with many of my former students. They're doctors, lawyers, nurses, teachers, published authors. They worked in Silicon Valley. And they weren't all straight A students. But what they did have going for them was two very important things. One, they were very hard workers. And secondly, they got along well with other people. My son, when he was here at Monache, had a friend named Shirley. And the two of them are still friends. They worked together at Google, at Tesla, the electric car company, and now they're working at Teladoc. They've been friends for all these years. So I encourage you to follow your dreams, decide what you want to do, and go for it. But pay the penalty of hard work. And that's, where you want to be. So I really want to encourage you to do that. One of the questions, incidentally, thank you for writing down the questions that you wanted me to respond to, because it really helps me direct what I'm saying to you. And they were really good questions. The first one, what motivated you to write this? Well, I come from an immigrant family. My grandparents, all four of them, came from Europe, from Yugoslavia. So I understand what it's like to be an immigrant and to come from an immigrant family. The other thing is, a lot of people aren't aware that why did the people come at different points in our country? Well, one of them was they wanted cheap labor. So at the turn of the century, that's when my family came here. Now, I grew up in a Colorado coal mining town. We had no refrigerator. We had no telephone. We walked every place we went because the car broke down most of the time. We only had one car. And so the idea of not having things was fun. But I didn't care because nobody in the town had anything either. So we were all good. Fortunately, but again, I understand that from the immigrant point of view and what that's happening. I hope that one of the things this book will do is to encourage people. First of all, to encourage the people who are like you in the book, and the fact that notice they never gave up. They always continued working hard no matter what happened to them. I'd like to just go into a few of the questions now, and then I'm going to go back to the idea of the immigration issue. First of all, there was no one character in the book. Elena is a compilation of a lot of people that I had in school. It's not just one person. I did borrow her name from one of my former students named Maria Elena, and she is in the book in several places. One, she was an illegal immigrant. Two, she did have difficulties. When she came to the United States, she had never been in a school ever. She was illiterate because it was too dangerous in Mexico for her to walk to school, and there was no transportation. So she came to Woodville and had wonderful teachers. Long story short, went through Monache High School, graduated from a university, became a teacher at New York University, and then currently she is living in Milan, Italy with her husband and son. So some of the things in there are definitely from her life. The illegal immigrant issue, the fact that she was concerned about her citizenship, some of the other things too. The fact that she would study at night in the bathroom because the rest of the family was asleep, and so she would be there on her own studying, and she'd turn the lights on. She did that. She would study her vocabulary cards in front of her as she was doing the dishes. Again, same thing we talked about at the beginning, highly motivated. This is a dream, and I'm going to do what I have to do to follow it. some of the other characters in the book, first of all, Maria did not have a family that she had to take care of. She was in a family and had younger brothers, but she didn't have to take care of them. Mr. Corbett is based on a lot of the counselors that I've had here at Monache. One of them was my son's counselor who got him through this school. I'm indebted to him for that. Jose is a combination of a lot of people. He's part of a boy that I went to high school with, and also that I dated later on. And also the kindness is really, I take it from my husband, because that's the way he was. He was that kind of a person too. If you have,
just a second.
one of the other issues is a lot of the people that helped me with the book were my neighbors. And so I was talking to my neighbor, Lily Barrios, and I said, I want to put a labor camp in my book, but I've never been to one. And she said, oh, I grew up in the Woodville labor camp, let's go. And I said, great. So the labor camp that is described in the book is actually the Woodville labor camp. And I would never have been able to do that without her. And again, back to the initial thing, making friends, treating people well, it just has enriched my life enormously. Now Luis, who goes into the service, that's based on, again, on the boy that was in high school and I later dated. He came from a poor family, and his only way, in terms of education, was to go into the service, which he did. He went into the service for 4 years, and then when he got out, he went to college and became a psychologist, and eventually had several psychological, I'm not sure what they were, anyway, basically, there were several of them which he owned and operated very, very successfully. Last time I saw him, he was retired, and he was working to help children who'd been abused. That was his goal. He was doing it for free. I have been enriched by so many, many, many people in my life. Now, one of the things also that I had to ask people about, the other person about the military was a neighbor across the street named Hector. And Hector came from a family, there were lots of kids, and his breakfast was 1 tortilla and a cup of coffee. And if he hadn't had lunch at school, he wouldn't have had anything else to eat that day. So he was strongly motivated to do something with his life, and he went into the service and came out of it, and then was a prison guard at the prison until he retired. But he talked a lot about his experiences, and those experiences became part of who Luis is. The idea that this is one of the ways that you enrich your life and it becomes a better life for you. Someone asked me what was the restaurant. El Tapatio, my favorite restaurant in town. I love that place.
I told him it was El Nuevo. I didn't think it was El Tapatio.
You didn't think it was? Okay. Okay, good man. All right, a couple of other things here that people have asked me about. I'll just go through them. Sylvia and Hector both helping with this book. And if you look in your book, you'll see acknowledgments. And those are the people that helped me with my book. And in my life, if I didn't have people to help me, I wouldn't be where I am now. So the important thing here is the idea that, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid. So I gave part of what I'd written to Sylvia, and she read it over, and I said, tell me what you think. And she said, well, you called the labor contractor George Rodriguez, and he's the villain in the story. And she said, my brother is named George Rodriguez, and he's a labor contractor. Okay, I'm taking that out. And changed it. And I knew no Ignacio, so I figured that one was safe. So that's why that became his name. Okay. one more. Someone asked me if there was anything that I took out of the book or that I changed. In the process of writing, you change things a lot, and until it's the right way. And sometimes it was just a conversation with someone that I would change part of the book. Or maybe I knew somebody or asked a question, like the George Rodriguez part. So those are all important things. And again, anytime I write, I do a lot of research. Okay, back to immigration. Kevin McCarthy, as you know, has been our representative in Congress. And I went to a fundraiser for him once, and I gave him my book. And I said, I have a gift for you. And he said, you do? And I said, yes. I said, this is a book that I've written. And inside of it, I put down, let's work together to bring these young people out of the shadows. He was pleased with the book. He hasn't done anything about it. The question that someone asked was also, how have things changed, or are they the same? Unfortunately, a lot of things are the same. And there's almost a punitive situation here where people are anti-immigration and, but these kids have never known any other country but this one. They're Americans. They're Americans in every way you can ask them to be. And so my feeling, very strong feeling, is that they have a right. They have a right to citizenship. And I will continue working. I haven't made a lot of progress yet, but I will continue working. One of the things that you can do, and a lot of people don't think about this, just go on the internet, find out who your congressman is, and write them a letter from your perspective. And I think that's something that we often are too passive, and we say, well, there's nothing I can do about it. But I've experienced things politically when I did do something about it and it did work. So I would encourage you and your parents, and first of all, look at the people that you're voting for, they're voting for, and do vote to make a difference. So we'll continue working on that. Someone asked me, have I ever known anyone who was detained by ICE? And the answer is yes. There's a young man that I know right now has been separated from his wife and 3 children. He's in the process of going legally because his children and wife are citizens to come to the United States and be a part of the family again. And it's hard, to go back to Mexico and be with them for a while. So yes, I'm very much in favor of that. One of the people that I interviewed for this book is the head of the Tulare County Agricultural Department. And we talked about immigrants. And she said if it weren't for the immigrants, Tulare County would not have the wealth that it has. Just bottom line. She said it wouldn't. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but Tulare County agriculture is one of the largest agricultural areas in the world. It could be a separate country if we wanted it to be. We export to 75 countries. All of the things that we grow. And that doesn't happen unless there are people out there working in the fields. So it's important for us to respect and honor the people who provide the wealth of this county. And I don't see that happening sometimes. Okay. Another question that people asked is if I speak Spanish. Unfortunately, I don't. Now, when I was in high school, I was very arrogant. I had to take 2 years of Spanish because I had to have that in order to get to college. I had to have a foreign language. So I did, probably what a lot of you do, learn the vocabulary to pass the test in my head, for the test out of my head, right? I'm never going to need to use this. Why would I want to know Spanish? Oh, well. And then My junior year, the people next door went to Mexico and invited me to go along with them. And I kicked myself all up and down the Paseo de la Reforma because I couldn't speak to anybody. And now, of course, I wish I had it, but I don't. I think it's very important to be bilingual. Very, very important. Okay. I think we've got... Someone asked, who is your target audience? And my response to that is everyone. A lot of the adults like this book as well. And one of my friends is just a fanatic about it. I also wanted you to see, there are 2 books. I'll talk to you a little bit about publication and how you get a book published. The first time this book was published, I entered a contest, a romance writing contest, and I won first prize. And the prize was publication. So the company published my first book called Sarah Darling, which takes place in San Francisco during the gold rush. And it's sanitized, it's not a sexy romance, so you guys could read it. Anyway, then because we became friends, she started publishing my other books as well. Unfortunately, she died, and I had to get my books republished. So I found an editor that a friend of mine used, and she republished the book, and we had to have a different cover. So I don't know which book you have. Do any of you have this one? You may have the older one. Do you have this one?
It's right back there. Can you grab it, Isaiah? Show her which one you have.
No, that's the old book. This is a new one. The girl on the cover is from Monache High School. The photographer who did the picture was from Monache High School. Now, another question someone asked me is, why did you choose not to have one character narrate the book? Okay, I don't know what you've been talking about, first person, second person, or third person in terms of writing. First person is I. And I have written a book, my first one, in first person, and it limits you. And I told my friends, if I ever decide to write in first person and present point of view, lock me in a closet and don't let me come out until I change my mind. Because it limits you and it's too hard to do. That's why third person, where you can go in and out of people's lives and what they're doing and how they're experiencing things, works much better. Another question, are you proud of the effects this book has had? Absolutely. Enormous pride, enormous pride. And being able to touch someone's life, being able to have them read something, and I've had students say that it was the best book they'd ever read. I've had other ones say that they could hardly wait to put the book down. Those are things that I think are really, really important to me as a person. Okay. Someone asked me, how long did it take you to write the book? I don't know, because I have a life, and so I write, and then I don't write, and I write, and then I don't write. And in terms of length, I have no idea. Okay. Now, the next question was, what do you like more, teaching or writing? I like them both. After I left Monache, I had a private tutoring business for 20 years. And a lot of the East Indian children were very good in math, but not so good in English. So I had a lot of them. I had one girl for 10 years, one for 9. And I have the home phone number of 9 doctors in Porterville because I've tutored their kids. Another question that people asked me was, why did you decide to become a teacher? And that was a pretty simple thing, really, excuse me. I grew up, as I said, in a Colorado coal mining town. There was no high school. My mother went to the 8th grade, my father went to the 6th. their parents were immigrants. They didn't have much. When my father was in the 7th grade, he was already almost 6 feet tall. And his father told him, "You look like a man, you work like a man." He pulled him out of school and made him work in the coal mine. He was a very brutal man. And my father left home and was on his own and worked in mines for the rest of his life. When the mine shut down after World War II, we were forced to move to another town. And this town was the salvation of our family. It wasn't easy because it was hard to find housing after World War II. We lived in an apartment which was basically a single car garage that had been turned into an apartment. My sisters and I slept in a double bed in the kitchen. My parents had their bedroom and bathroom. That was it. And it was very, very difficult. The only way we could cook is to use the wood-burning, coal-burning stove, which meant the whole house was very, very hot, until my father bought a hot plate. So those are experiences that we had, but the important thing was that town had a college. I never could have been able to go to college if we had stayed in that Colorado coal mining town. My parents were both brilliant, but they had no opportunity for an education. So education is like gold. Why would you not, if there was gold on the street, why would you not want to pick up as much as you could? And so the idea, I remember my parents sitting around the table and saying, "Gosh, wouldn't it be wonderful if all of our girls graduated from high school?" Well, all of their girls graduated from college, became teachers, have master's degrees. I have 2 masters. Because we had the opportunity. And we had teachers who cared for us and showed us the way and helped us. When I was in the 6th grade, my teacher said, "Well, you're going to go to college, aren't you, Shirley?" And I went home and I said, "Mom, what is a college?" I didn't know. I didn't know any of these things. So I had been given so much, why would I not want to give back? And my life has been enormously enriched by the students that I've had. And, there's lawyers, doctors, it's just many, 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 many people in my life who have given to me because I was their teacher. And I can't think of anything I would rather do. Now, one of the other questions was, are you going to write another book about Elena? I really can't, because I'm too busy and I'm old. I'm going to leave some of these with you. I have written 8 books so far, and currently I have 2 books in my computer and 2 in my head. One book is a sequel to another romance that I wrote last year, and the other is a continuation of my life story. Most of my books are about my life, and the first one was about growing up in a Colorado coal mining town during World War II, called Don't Be Give Up. That's still one of the most popular books. The idea of writing, to me, is very, very important. My husband died about 3 years ago, and I can't even begin to explain what that does after you've lived your life with someone for 56 years and they're gone. But what I spent my time doing was writing, and one of the books I was writing was about when we met and fell in love and got married. And it's called Rocky Road is More Than a Candy Bar, because it was a rocky road. It was my first years of teaching at Tulare Union High School, which was very, very difficult. I was supposed to teach English, speech, drama, and dance, 2 classes of dance. I had never had any dance training, but that didn't matter. I watched a lot of musicals. And when I was here at Monache, I actually choreographed 13 musicals. So you never know what life's going to hand you and what difficulties. So as I was working on that book, I stopped working on it, and then because my husband was sick. And then I thought, I don't know if I can go back to it. I'm going to be too sad. But it happened differently. We were there together again. We were having a good time. We had just fallen in love, and it was a healing process. So writing for me is essential. If I don't write, there's something missing in my life. And the 2 books that I'm working on now, as I said, were the continuation. The other 2 that I have in my head, one of them is called Traveling with Strangers, because I've traveled a lot, and my husband didn't like planes, so I traveled a lot by myself. The other one is Thank You for Learning Me My English, which I love that title. And it's going to be just short stories about what I did through my teaching experience. So I'm 86 now, and I've got to live to be 120 to get all the things done that I want to do. And I also do a lot of quilting. So when we're looking at what we're talking about here with this book, how you spend your time and what you want to do in your life, I think really an awful lot of it depends on you. But it also depends on the people who are near you, the people who are your friends, your family, the people, your teachers. And all of us have an opportunity. So if you're sitting here in this classroom and you're going out to lunch or brunch or wherever you're going, and you see that kid that's sitting there by themselves, go up to them and ask them how they're doing. You know, be a friend to somebody that maybe doesn't have a friend. This is something that I think, at least for me, every time I've had an opportunity to make a friend with someone, I do it. And I'm 86, my son said, Mom, you better keep the friends you got because you won't be making any new ones. Not true. I made 7 so far in the last couple of years. I go to an exercise group 3 times a week. But again, this book was one of the things I wanted to write about because I had experienced prejudice against Mexican Americans when I was little. I was about 8 years old, and this boy came up to me and said, "You don't want to play with that dirty Mexican." So I'm thinking, you know, being dirty was not a good thing. So I'm thinking, well, I don't understand that. So I went over, I said, I want to go over to your house to get a drink of water. She says, well, your house is just right next door. No, I want to go over to your house. Okay. And there's her mother scrubbing her floor on her hands and knees. So I went to my dad and I said, this is stupid. Why did they say that? He said, this is called prejudice. And people are judged on the basis of their ethnic background, their skin, their, you know. And I said, but that's stupid. He said, yeah, it is. And so that's been a part of my whole life. Mexican Americans have always been in my life. They were people I dated, they were people who were my best friends. And so I'm really passionate about the way the dreamers are being handled. And it's a product of all of the stuff that I've experienced in my life, all of the things that have happened to me. And, you know, I want to continue to write. The book that I'm working on now, which is called Dialogue in Shades of Brown, is when I was teaching at Cal Poly. And I was very involved in, that was when we had the Civil Rights Movement and the war in Vietnam. And I was very, very involved in trying to get a class in black literature at Cal Poly, which had a lot of problems trying to do it. But again, that's who you, I guess what I'm really saying is, I write because I have to. And I'm a talker, as you probably have guessed. And what it's always this thing of how can I do something? How can I help people? How can I encourage people? And you do it through the written word, and you do it through writing. Now, writing is not, got to tell you one other thing. I don't know where we are in time.
You have time, about 20 minutes.
Okay. Anybody can publish a book on Amazon. Did you know that? Is that a surprise to you? Well, Amazon.com there's a process that you have to learn on how to do it. They will suggest to you that you spend $700 to get some of their in things, that you have them do all sorts of things for you, but it's going to cost you. But you can do it on your own and just find out what the process is. Don't Be Give Up was published by an author. No, it wasn't. Yeah, I did have a publisher publish that, and it was a mess. So I had to put it on, and she went broke. So I had to put it on myself. It took me a month to do it. Now, my friend Marilyn Meredith, who writes 2 books every year, she's written, 40, 45 books. She lives in Springville. Told me about an editor that she met, and I got in touch with her. She does all of my books. And she did this version of that one. So the process is, I write the book, I send it to Lorna. Lorna edits it, she sends it back to me. I make the changes, then she sends it. She does all the technical stuff. She charges me a certain amount. Basically, I think $1 a word or something. I don't know what it is, but anyway, I know the book that I sent her on Rocky Road about my husband, and she knew he had died. So she sent me a bill for $800, and then she put discount. She only charged me $200 for all that work. I'm just lucky to have friends in my life. So that's the way I go with everything. And Amazon will take a cut of whatever you publish, and sometimes, especially Kindle doesn't pay much at all. I have received checks for $1.27 on occasion, which meant somebody bought one thing on Kindle. Sometimes it's a little bit more than that. We've got a little bit of time. Can we have some time for questions?
Absolutely. The other class that's watching you, right there, you want to wave at them on the laptop?
Oh.
They want to come and meet you. Is that okay?
Oh, sure.
We're just going to try to squeeze in. Okay.
Sure.
Let me tell her.
Does anybody have any last minute questions they want to ask? Yes.
How long was Elena's parents gone for?
I'm sorry, honey, I have a hearing problem.
How long were Elena's parents gone?
How long were Elena's parents gone?
I'm sorry.
How long were Elena's parents gone?
Probably not too long, probably in terms of months. They would have been gone in months. It would have been easy to write about them being deported, with the immigration thing, but I wanted to show that not only did other people take advantage of these migrants, but their own people did too. Incidentally, that incident, this is a true story. The lady who cuts my hair, her husband was working in the field, and it was a contract thing, and when it was over, the people left them in a building, and that was out in the country. They didn't even know where they were because they didn't speak English, and they left them there and didn't pay them. Luckily, somebody came by, and a Baptist church, kind of took them under their wing and helped them. And they're very successful people now. But so exploitation doesn't just happen from other people; it happens from within your group as well. And that's why I wanted to put that in, because we have to. All of us have to take care of each other, no matter what our group, what our age, whatever. We all have to rely on one another. Okay, any other questions? Everything that... Oh, incidentally, I will leave some... All you have to do... This is a list of my books, which I'll leave for you. All you have to do is go on Amazon and type in Shirley Skufka Hickman, and you'll get all my books and be able to see what they look like. Okay? Any other questions?
You can ask some other questions that maybe
Yes.
weren't answered.
All of your books are based on real events that happened in your life, right?
All of the ones that are my memoirs are true stories. And Don't Be Give Up was growing up in a Colorado coal mining town during World War II. Is Everybody Happy Now is when we moved to Gunnison and I had cultural shock. I was brought up in a community which was Catholic, immigrant, and Democrat. I moved 30 miles away to a town that was agricultural. People have been on their land for generations, Republican and Protestant. And culture. Is everybody happy now is about that book. Family is Forever is...
They're here.
Okay. Family is Forever is about the... a continuation about life. I'm 86 years old and my hearing is not...
I forgot the question. I was thinking of it, but then I forgot it.
He had a question, but he forgot.
Oh,
Yeah, I
well,
must have had the paper with me. I wrote it down, but I lost it. Well, actually, I put it in, but...
well, when you think about it, go ahead and ask. I'm willing to answer any questions that you have. Yes?
In your book, did you change anything that actually happened, like, in the story based on the events?
I need a translation teacher.
Okay, so did you change the actual event? So you got the story, did you change details in it?
Oh, yeah. And some I made up. You know, the fact that Elena has a brother and sister, that's total fiction. I made that up. And writers that I know say there's no that write it the way you want to, and there's no reason, you know, you don't have to change it if you want to. I had two older sisters, and when a lot of my books are biographies, and I said, you know, how do you feel about this? And they said, write it the way you want to, and we'll swear that that's exactly what happened. So it's very important to have a family that supports you in terms of what you're doing. And my husband was really good about that. I would read him a chapter, and I always knew it wasn't good if he'd say, I think that's a transitional chapter. And I thought, oh, okay, there's nothing happening here. I need to change that. I belong to a writers group. It's over 50 years old, and I still meet on Wednesdays with only one person. And we have, what we do is we print out our chapter. And I don't know if you know Brent Gill or not, but Brent and I meet on Wednesday, and he has a chapter that I critique, and he gives a chapter of mine, and we critique them and make them better, kind of thing. Okay, any other questions?
Are Brad and Melissa real? Like, were they?
Are what?
Are Brad and Melissa based on real people?
Brad is based on many, many people that I had as students here at Monache. And there was a situation actually when a girl who was here illegally did marry one of the Monache students who already was 18, and they never dated, they never went together, they got married so she could be legal. I do not recommend that. That is considered fraud, but it did work for them. And then later on they got a divorce. But that's not something we want to do. Okay, anything else? Yes?
What inspired you to make a...
Okay, have your teacher yell at you.
If someone else wants to ask a question, go ahead and we'll figure this out.
Okay. I'm open to any questions you ask. I love being here. This is so exciting to me. You know, teachers give to students, but students give to us as well, a lot. And your energy, and the fact that, you know, you're just beginning to do so many things that you'll do in your life. That's exciting.
So this is the other class
Do you
that
have a
was
question?
watching.
You know everything to know.
Okay, so his question was, what inspired you to make conflict between Elena and Miguel as brother and sister?
Living with two sisters. And I don't know any family that doesn't have some conflict between one and the other. And I had an older sister that when Elena is being bossy to Miguel, that was my sister. She was very, very bossy. And I resented that. when I was writing Is Everybody Happy, I called her and I said, Mary, I want to thank you because there were so many times when you told me what to do and I resented it, but I would have not done what I've done without your help. So I want to thank you. And guess what she said? It's about time. So yeah, okay, any others? Any other questions?
I have one.
Okay.
What was your favorite part to write about?
My favorite part was having the book finished. And this is like producing a child, although it takes more than 9 months and you don't need a doctor to assist. So when you finished a book, it just is very, very fulfilling. And you have the sense that the time you've spent has been worthwhile. No, I don't have to write. I don't have to do anything. I'm retired. I have been for quite a few years. And how I spend my time is very, very important. But I'm the kind of person that wants to see something physical for the time that I've spent. So my books are that. They are physically, this is a physical thing that I see and that I love. And anyway. And I'm also a quilter. I do a lot of quilting. And again, part of what, at least for me, what makes me happy is being able to give to other people. And our quilt group in Porterville does that. They make small quilts and they give them to children at Christmas time that wouldn't have presents otherwise. They also have larger quilts that they give to people children who come with their parents to the crisis center. They also have another one called Local Heroes, which they make quilts for our servicemen. And I'm a part of that, very proud to be a part of that, because they do a lot of good work, and it fills that time. You can't just watch television all the time, although I do a lot of it. Any other questions? Okay, yes.
Why did you make the book?
What?
Why did you make the book?
Why did I make the book? Because I wanted to share my feelings about these young people, and hopefully that people would be encouraged enough to try to make some changes. And again, a lot of these people are the kids that I grew up with. And they're people that I care about. And I saw sometimes some mistreatment, not that much. And so, that was my passion. I've always been the kid who stood up for the kid that other people made fun of or bullied. That I did that when I was 8 years old. So there's, part of who you are, what you are, the kind of person that you want to be. And so I am very passionate about unfairness wherever it occurs. I just, why can't people be kind and generous and loving? Why can't they? That's in us, as well as the hate and the anger. And it's a choice. You have a choice every single day of your life to decide, do I want to be a part of the good or do I want to be part of the bad? And I'll tell you, it's a whole lot more fun being part of the good. You make a lot more friends that way. You have a much better time. You avoid jail. All these pluses. Okay. Thank you for your question. Yes?
What made you think that writing this book would get people attention to read it?
What, that they would read it?
What made you think that writing this book would make people turn back and just read it?
Yeah, I had no idea. Good question. What made me think people would want to read this book? I never know. I have no idea why people would want to read this book. One of the things I forgot to mention is the title of the book and where it comes from. This comes from, again, a former student of mine, and her mother brought her to the United States legally, and she told her, she said, I brought you to the best country in the world. Now you decide, fall in love with an orange tree or a book. And what she meant is work in the fields the rest of your life or get an education. She did get an education. She's a teacher here in Porterville, and at one time was head of the migrant program at the district office. So when I was a kid, I was 6 years old, and it was during World War II. And I said to myself, I must remember everything that's happened because someday I'm going to write a book. And I did as an adult. So I think there are things that you kind of are a part of who you are from the very beginning. Like there are people that are athletes, and I just marvel at what they're able to do with their bodies, or dancers, or so many things, so many skills that people have, which I think are just extraordinary. Yourself too, I think sometimes, and say, who are you? And at least for me, I get depressed pretty fast, and especially after my husband died. And then I chose not to. Now, if I'm giving to somebody else, I'm happy because it makes me feel good. So if I'm making a quilt, I'm thinking about some little girl at Christmas time who's going to get this. Or I'm working on the book, and I have no idea that this book would be read at Monache High School. This is beyond my wildest dreams. I mean, it is just so wonderful, and that it's touched you in some way. So I think that's really the kind of experience that you have, that you give to others, and that's what makes you feel good. At least it does me. I can sit around and get very depressed, and sometimes I do, and then I say, get out of it.
Do you think this book that you wrote will make or has made someone change the way they take decisions?
Good question. Do you think that the way people reading this book has maybe changed them in some way? That's a question I have to ask you. And you don't have to tell me, and you don't have to raise your hand. I just have to look at your face, and I can tell.
From my way, I think it has changed some of my, the way I take decisions. But I'm asking if you meant to write the book for that.
Absolutely, yes. And I wanted Elena to be a strong character. I wanted Jose to stand up for Elena. Because the men that are in my life are like that. Like my husband was like that, my son is like that. They stand up for people and become an advocate. Okay, good questions. Any others?
You guys have about 2 minutes to ask a question. The bell's gonna ring.
Well, I would love to meet each one of you individually and sit down and talk to you for an hour. I think that would be a little impossible. I'm too old. I don't have much time left. But I really sincerely enjoy being here. I've been excited ever since she called me. I love being at Monache. I love Monache. This is the best school I ever taught at. That included when I taught at Cal Poly, so you know how important that is. But it's wonderful to be around young people. And if in something I have written or something I have said, it has enriched your life, then I am thrilled. Writing is not easy. It's very time consuming. I will spend 2 weeks on one chapter sometimes until I get it right.
Well, if it makes you feel better, I have students say all the time, this is the first full book I've read since junior high. So they're excited enough by your writing that they've read the whole thing ahead of us. So,
well, I would recommend the Don't Be Give Up book, because that's about growing up during World War II, and you'll learn a lot about history if you're interested in that. But as I said before, you can go on Amazon.com and those are all available. Everything's on Kindle. So there should be, if you're interested in reading it. The other thing is read. Don't spend all your time on the computer things. I look things up probably 5 times a day on the internet because I need it for my research. And I love it. I absolutely love the internet when I can. For example, I'm working on a novel sequel, which is set in the Regency period in England in 1800. And so I just went on the other day and said, what were common jobs for young girls during that period of time? Well, there weren't very many of them. And if you were a button maker, you were going to end up in poverty. So you don't want to be a button maker. So in my story, I have this information. Very, very much for inviting me. I'm so thrilled to be back at Monache, where I taught for 25 years. And it's so exciting to be around young people and see the enthusiasm and the excitement that you have, and just being physically here on campus is just a treat for me. Just dozens of happy memories with this school. Thank you also for reading my book, which has been really an exciting part of doing this for me. I have the questions that several classes have asked, and I'm going to respond to them, and we may have time afterward for other questions. I'm not sure. We'll find out. Before I talk about my book, I want to talk about you, sitting here in this classroom, being here at this school. And I want to encourage you to follow your dreams. Many of my students that I had here at Monache have gone on to do some marvelous things. They're doctors, lawyers, teachers, nurses. A lot of them are in Silicon Valley. And there are two characteristics that all of these successful students have had. One, they were hard workers, and two, they got along well with other people. And I think that's very, very important to convey that message. My son went to Monache. He was not a very good student, but he certainly was involved in athletics, and he was very involved in student council. And his ability to deal with people in student council and get them to work together to reach a goal is what has made him a success in Silicon Valley. Also, friendships. He was a close friend of Arnon Shirley, and Arnon and my son Joseph worked together at Google. They worked together at Tesla, the electric car company, and they're working together now at, I don't know what it's called. Anyway, it's a medical thing. So again, that's been a 33-year-old friendship. And a lot of the people that you meet and will know at this school may become lifelong friends for you. So the important thing is really two things. Be a hard worker. Whatever you do, try to put yourself into it, the energy. And the more you do this, the better it's going to be. And making friends is very important. Also, if you see that person that's sitting there by themselves and nobody's talking to you, go over there and talk to them. Show them your friendship. The more you give to other people, the more you get back. You know, I'm 86 years old and I'm still making new friends. Thank God. Anyway, now that's basically I wanted to talk to you about motivating you to use your talents, your techniques, and to work hard. Now, the book. First of all, thank you for reading my book. It's very exciting to have your work acknowledged. And I'm just going to go through a lot of the questions that you've asked. First of all, Elena is not a real person. She is a composite of a lot of people, many, many people here at Monache. So there is one girl, her name was Maria Elena Rodriguez, and I took her middle name. She was in Mexico and had not gone to school a day in her life. And then she was brought here to the United States, and she had wonderful teachers in the 7th grade who were bilingual. Anyway, long story short, she went through, got an education, was in my class, and went on to college. Actually got, I think, a PhD at Stanford, and was a teacher at New York University. She now lives in Milan with her husband and son. and she was functionally illiterate when she started, but she worked very hard. Some of the things that I took out of her life to put in here, one of them was, where the girl is studying her vocabulary words as she's doing the dishes, that was from her. Another one where she is doing her homework at night in the bathroom, that was from her life. So again, Elena is a composite of many, many people that I know and students that I have. It's not just one person. Mr. Corbett is actually a composite of many of the counselors that I had at Monache, and especially Hank Handelsman, who was my son's counselor and a wonderful person. That person is always there to help kids, and you've had them. I also relied a lot on my neighbors for the characterizations. I wanted to have a labor camp, and I knew nothing about labor camps. So my neighbor down the way, Lily Barrios, came. I went over to her house, and I said, I've never been to a labor camp, and I don't know anything about it. And she said, oh, I grew up in the Woodville labor camp. I'll take you. And she took me. So that camp that you read about in the book, that's the Woodville labor camp that Lily Barrios took me to. Another neighbor, remember Luis and the going into the service? Okay, that's based on two people. One, a boy that I went to high school with and later dated, and also my neighbor across the way. Hector was brought up in a family with lots and lots of kids. Their breakfast was one tortilla and a cup of coffee. Lunch was at school. If he didn't have lunch at school, he wouldn't have had anything to eat. He came from very, very poor circumstances. And the service for him was a way out of that. And so he went into the service. He served in the Gulf War, which had gave him a lot of nightmares. But he overcame all of that. And he was a guard at the prison and led a very successful life. And his kids are great. Anyway, so these are people who are in my life, and people have always been a source for me of information and nurturing and caring and love. And that's what I hope all of you will be in your lives as well. One of the things, as I was writing the book, I would give pieces to my neighbors and ask them to tell me about them. So Sylvia Villarreal said, Shirley, there's a little problem here on your book. I mean, it's not a problem, and you can leave it this way if you want to, but I just want to mention you have a labor contractor in there that's the villain of the book. And she said, you've named him George Rodriguez. My brother is George Rodriguez, and he's a labor contractor. Oh, I'm taking that out. I knew no Ignatios, that's why he got his name. So, again, help from the people that I have been around in my life. Let me go through a couple other things. Oh, Brad could be anybody. Part of the men, Jose and Brad, I used my husband for that because he was a very nurturing, kind person. He was very quiet, soft-spoken, but he is very kind, a very kind person. And certainly, and also the boy that I went to high school with was that way as well. In fact, he did, and he went to his service too. And after he got out, he went to college, became a psychologist, and operated several psychological clinics down in the LA area, and then retired. And even in his retirement, he was there counseling children that had been abused. So, these are people in my life that made something of their lives when they didn't start out with much. Okay. The question that several people asked was, why did you decide to write this book? What motivated you? I was motivated because I come from an immigrant background. All four of my grandparents came from Yugoslavia. At the turn of the century, America needed labor. Sound familiar? And so they got the immigrants to come in, and they promised them all sorts of things which they often didn't have. So I grew up in a Colorado coal mining town where all the grandparents were immigrants. They came from Yugoslavia or Germany or Italy. So that was my background. We moved later, and I'll tell you about that after a while. The other thing that I've always disliked is unfairness. And when I was about 8, I was in school, and we were on the playground, and this boy came up to me and said, "You don't want to play with that dirty Mexican." Well, being dirty was not a good thing, so I'm sitting there. She's one of my best friends. There were only 3 girls in that class. I had not much. So I thought, maybe this is something. So I said, "I need to go to your house to get a glass of water." She says, "Well, your house is just right next door." "I know, but I have to go to your house." And I go there, and there's her mother scrubbing her floor on her hands and knees. So I talked to my dad, and I said, "Dad, what is this?" And he said, "Well, honey, this is called prejudice, and people judge people in a bad way based on their race or whatever." And I said, "But Daddy, that's unfair." That has been a motivation for me my entire life. And what I wanted to do with this book was to show the unfairness of the DACA, the Dreamers. And one of the things that I did with the book, I went to a fundraiser for Kevin McCarthy, who is our congressman, and I handed him the book. And I said, "I have a gift for you." And he said, "Oh." And I said, "This is the gift." And in it I wrote, and I write this in every time I autograph a book, "Let's work together to bring these young people out of the shadows." And I feel very strongly about that. And that was my motivation really for writing this. The other thing was, there were many of my students who were suffering under these conditions, and so I wanted to do that. Do I know someone who's been detained by ICE? Yes, I do. He's a young man. He's separated from his wife and children who were born here, and he's going through the paperwork to come back here legally. It will take a year or more. It's very frustrating. It's very sad. He's an absolutely fantastic person, and he should be granted this. I would try to do whatever I could do, but I don't know if I can do much at all. The immigration issue, of course, is very complex, but I would recommend all you have to do is go online, find out who your representatives are, and write them a letter. Or send them an email and tell them how you feel about things. Because sometimes things happen when one person stands up. And I've been involved in political things where that's happened. But also, it gives you a sense of empowerment. I'm not going to just sit here and take whatever. I'm going to fight for what I believe in and what I think is right. I do that all the time, much to the annoyance of my husband, who sometimes says, well, but anyway. So that's a part. You need to be politically active. That doesn't mean you're out in the streets or anything like that. You don't have to do it. A letter is a powerful, powerful thing. Words are powerful things. Hopefully, as you read this book, you were thinking of something in your life that you might want to improve. I mean, if that happens, I would just be totally ecstatic. Okay. Who is your target audience? Everyone. A lot of my adult friends have read this book and love it. One of them is a total fanatic. Are you proud of the effects this book has had? Absolutely. The fact that the school that I taught in, and this is required reading here, is a joy beyond my imagination. I mean, this is just so exciting to me that in some way, maybe something in this book will influence your life in a positive way. Why did you choose not to have one character narrate the book? Okay, I don't know if your teachers talked to you about this or not. First person, second person, and third person. First person is the I. And I wrote my first book, Don't Be Give Up, first person, present tense. And I told my friends, if I ever do that again, lock me in a closet, don't let me come out till I change my mind. It's too hard. It also narrows what you can write about because everything has to be from that perspective. When you use third person, that doesn't happen. You can shift from one person's point of view to the other, and that makes it easier. Oh, how many times I've kicked myself for that. When I was a junior, my neighbors next door went to Mexico and invited me to go with them. And here I was mumbling around trying to figure out where in the recesses of my brain are the words that I need to communicate. And I'm really sorry that I didn't learn Spanish. I really am. Okay. Oh, you asked about the restaurant? El Tapatio, my favorite restaurant. I haven't been there since the pandemic. Did you have any setbacks while writing the story or take anything out? No. I revised a lot. I didn't have any setbacks. I think, but when I write a book, it doesn't just flow. I mean, I will write something and then that doesn't work, so I rewrite it. So I may spend 2 weeks on one chapter. I didn't on this book. This book really flowed quite well. I've written 8 books so far. Well, I'll talk about that later. Anyway. How long did it take you to write the book? I'm not sure, because I write and then I do other things, so I have no idea. Oh, publishing. My first book, which was, not that one, which was a romance set in San Francisco during the gold rush. I entered a contest for romance writers, and I won first prize. And the prize was publication of the book. So that book was published by Oak Tree Press. And then this book was also published by Oak Tree Press, the one that you have, and a couple of others. Unfortunately, the lady who ran the publishing company died, and so I had to get my books republished on Amazon. And there's a lady in Springville who writes 2 books a year. Every year she writes 2 books, 2 mysteries. And she must have written 40, 45 books, I don't know. She's been a part of our writing group for a long time. So I had to get my books republished, and she told me about a woman named Lorna who does this. And so this book had to be republished. I don't think you have this one. Anyway, the girl on this book is from Monache. The photographer who took the picture is from Monache. Her mom and my son were good friends. I mean, everybody's connected in Porterville in some way, right? The publishing process can be many different ways. And anybody can get something published on Amazon. I don't know if you're aware of that or not. You just have to know what the process is and how to do it. But be sure that you have something that you are proud of before you send it there. I have Lorna do all of my stuff, and the process is this. I write the book, I send it to Lorna, Lorna edits it, and she sends it back to me. And you know that wonderful thing on your computer where it says accept or reject? She will say, all I have to do is press that when she makes a comment, accept it or reject it, and then we go from there. Then she does all the mechanics of putting it on Amazon.com. We get a one copy to look over if there are any mistakes. And then from that point on, it's on Amazon. And you have my name on your book, Shirley Skufka Hickman. All you have to do is go on Amazon, type in my name, and all my books will be on there. I've written 8 books. I'm currently working on 2 more. One of them is a sequel to a romance that I wrote last year. The other one is a continuation of my life story. And it's about my years in Cal Poly, when I taught at Cal Poly. And it was during the Civil Rights Movement and the war in Vietnam. So a lot of that book deals again with injustice, racial prejudice. At that at one point at the school, I wanted to have a class in black literature, and I promoted that idea, thinking, this is a simple thing. It's not like I'm out there going to jail or anything for my belief in civil rights. But there were a lot of people who didn't want me to do that. And anyway, so that's part, the book that work that I'm working on right now is part of the struggle that I had personally with what happened and what we did at Cal Poly, and trying to deal with a lot of issues. And there were issues like, the war in Vietnam, and I wrote a lot of poetry during that period of time because that's the way I deal with a lot of stress. When I have a problem, and I deal with it. One of my students came to me, and he was being drafted to go to Vietnam. And so he gave me a paper, and it said, permission to withdraw. And I put no, and gave it back to him. And the department, I said, I don't want to send anybody off to war. So the English department chairman came to me and said, it's just going to make it more difficult. It's not going to change anything. And I was just really upset about it, so I wrote a poem about it. And the poem that I wrote is called Withdrawing. And I don't remember it exactly, so it's probably a little garbled, but this is the gist of it. He comes to me and makes a joke about being caught in a draft, but there's no humor in his eyes. He hands me the paper and I sign him because it is department policy and I have to go along with it, just as it is our country's policy to draft young men to go to war. That night I dream of coffins with American flags draped over them for those who have withdrawn. Now that particular poem was asked again by a former student of mine to be a part of an Agent Orange project that he was working on. So I sent him that poem and a couple of others. I haven't talked about poetry in the process. Okay. All right. Why did you decide, do you like teaching or writing more? I love them both. Why did you become a teacher? Growing up in a Colorado coal mining town where we had no refrigerator, no telephone, it was, I didn't know we were poor because everybody there was poor. But the people who were there were immigrants. All the grandparents are immigrants. They came from Yugoslavia, Germany, or Italy. And they had many, just very warm social things. But when the mine closed and the town shut down, basically, they had to find someplace else to go. And so my parents were moved 30 miles away, but it was cultural shock. In the coal mining town, Crested Butte, we were immigrants, Catholics, and Democrats. In the town we moved to, they were farmers who lived on their land for generations. They were Protestant and they were Republican. So it was cultural shock. And we lived in, housing was very difficult at the end of World War II. So we lived in what had been a one-compartment garage, a one-car garage, and the cars were smaller then. So you can imagine how tiny that was. My two sisters and I slept in a double bed in the kitchen. There was only one bedroom. We had a stove that was wood and coal stoves. And in order to cook, the stove had to be, of course, heated, so it was very miserable. It was very hot and miserable until my father bought another electric thing that we could use. So that was the background that I came from. And we moved when I was in the 6th grade. And I remember the teacher saying to me one day, you're going to college, aren't you, Shirley? And so I went home and I said, what's a college? I mean, I did not know at all. I mean, I didn't know any of this stuff. So she explained it to me. My teachers gave me so much. They were the people who were there to nurture me. They were the people who told me how you got into college. They were handing me books. Which book should I read? And they were, more importantly than that, they gave me a sense that I was important to them. And that was probably one of the most important things. So, in our background, my father only had a 6th grade education. He grew tall. All of us are tall in our family. So he was almost 6 feet tall when he was in the 7th grade. His father said, "You look like a man, you work like a man." So he pulled him out of school and made him work in a coal mine. He also was a very brutal man, so my father left home, was on his own from the time he was, I think, about 15 or 16. I never went back until after he married my mom. My mother had an 8th grade education. In that little Colorado coal mining town, there was no high school. That didn't exist. So my parents were both brilliant, but they never had an opportunity for an education. So I remember my parents sitting around the dinner table and talking, and they said, "Wouldn't it be wonderful if our children graduated from high school?" And we're thinking, wow, that would really be something. That would be really exciting. So education for us was like gold on the streets. Why would you not pick up as much as you possibly could? And that's how we felt. That's still how I feel about education. So my sisters and I did all become teachers. We all graduated from college. We all have master's degrees. I have 2. I have 1 more degree than my 2 sisters. A little competitive there. Anyway, but so they were always there for me, and then I had, in turn, was a teacher for them. And my students have given back to me so much. I'm still very close friends with the first student that I had in the first period class, my first year teaching at Tulare Union. We're still close friends. He's a retired judge now. So having the people, that you give to are giving back to you. And I think that's a very important lesson, that when you give to someone, you are enriching your own life as well. And my son, I was complaining about a friend that I had. My son told me the other day, "You better keep all the friends you have, Mom, because you're old now. It's too late to make new ones." And that's not true. I made like 7 in the last year because I belong to an exercise group and we're all buddies now. I have a tendency sometimes to get depressed, and my husband died 3 years ago. The worst thing that's ever happened to me in my life, because we lived together 56 years. That's a long time. Everything was with him and about him. So, but I found that when you get sad, that you can wallow in that. You can wallow in depression. You can wallow in your sadness, or you can get out and do something. And I had written part of the book about my husband and I falling in love and getting married, called Rocky Road is More Than a Candy Bar. And I left it, and I thought, I can't go back to this book. It's going to be too sad. But I thought, well, you better finish it. So I went back to the book, and it wasn't sad. Because we were there, we were young, we had fallen in love, and it was a healing process. So even though my husband is gone, he's still alive in my books. And that's a really, really empowering feeling to have. Let's see if there's anything I haven't. The idea of writing. There's a writing group in Porterville that has existed for 52 years. The reason I know it has existed for 52 years is because my son was just born, and I was teaching a class, teaching a class at Porterville College called Creative Writing. And that class, people would take the class, and then they would sign up to take it again. And finally, the administration said, "I think this is a club, it's not a class anymore." So they got rid of the class. But it's been in existence all these years. And I don't know if you know Brett Gill or not, who's written 2 books, working on the 3rd one. It's a lot of people have died, and a lot of people have moved, so Brett and I are the only 2 in the group right now. And what we do on Wednesdays is he prints out a chapter in his book, 1 copy for me, 1 copy for him. I do the same with my book. and we read each other's work and we comment about it. And it's wonderful, wonderful to be able to have somebody who is able to do that with you. We have also, people who want to write, but they don't. There are people who are far more skilled than I am, believe me. And the only difference between somebody who writes and gets it published and somebody who doesn't is just plain old hard work and motivation. And it's like, as somebody said, you put your seat on the chair and your hands in front of the computer and you do it. And the other problem that some people have when they're writing is they censor themselves. Oh, nobody's going to want to read this. Nobody's going to want to, and I didn't know. I mean, I had no idea that this book would be read at Porterville and Monache High. I mean, none whatsoever. So, had I thought when I was writing this, is this going to happen? The answer is no, I didn't. I didn't know that. I'm thrilled, but I didn't know it. So who's gonna read this book? Some people stop there and they say, well, nobody's going to read this book, so I'm not going to write it. Well, my books deal a lot with my life, and I've written 8 so far, and I'm working on 2 right now. But a lot of them deal with it. So I'm saying, if I were to say nobody's going to read this, I wouldn't continue writing, and I don't know who's going to read it. I'm always surprised. But the idea is, this is the story of my life, and I'm going to write it because I need to do it. Just like some people need to be out there exercising. Some people need to sing. Some people need to dance. We all have things that we need to do for our own self-fulfillment, because to some extent that's who we are. Who are we in terms of what we're doing? Who are we going to be? What mark do you want to leave on the world? How is the world going to be a better place because you've been in it? And I think those are large questions, but their answers are small. It's just a simple thing like when somebody needs some help, you help them out. When you see that kid that is sitting there by themselves, you go and talk to them and make them feel a part of what you're doing. There's just so many things, that little tiny things. The ocean is only made up of drops when you think about it. But the other part of it makes you feel good about yourself. So when I get depressed, what I have to do is do something for somebody else. Besides writing, I'm also a quilter. And I belong to a quilt club in Porterville. The first time I went to it, I was recovering from a stroke. And my friend Suzanne Path said, come to this quilt group. You sew, you'd like it. And I thought, I don't want to do this. And she said, come on. And I went, and I wrote down all these creative people, and I loved it. I felt really happy, and I still do. Our quilt group makes small little quilts with dolls to give to children who wouldn't have a Christmas otherwise. They also make larger quilts for children who come to the crisis center with their parents. And when I was talking to somebody about this, she said, there's a lot of double-decker beds in the facility. And the kids know where they belong because that's where the quilt is. And then there's another one that they've done recently, which is for our soldiers. It's called Local Heroes. And my cousin was able to get one of those. He fought in Vietnam, and as you know, we didn't treat our Vietnam soldiers very well. So he wrote a lovely thank you note saying, thank you, this not only warmed my body, but warmed my heart. So again, if you're doing something that's going to help other people, it empowers you, makes you feel good about yourself. You're saying, I'm a good person. Why am I a good person? Because I do these good things. And every moment of your life, in a way, you have a choice. Do you want to be the best you can be? Do you want to be a good person? Do you want to be a bad person? And I think good and bad are probably the wrong words to say. But do you want to be somebody that's going to help and make your life a little bit better for somebody? Are you proud of the effects this book has had? Enormous. One of the great moments of my life, really. And I think we've got, have I missed anything?
You have about 10 minutes.
I have about 10 minutes, okay.
We can some questions.
Yeah, we can do questions. Now, you've heard this before, if I covered everything, do you remember?
I think so.
I think I covered everything. I think I covered all your questions. Okay, let's open it up. Yes.
How did you meet your husband?
Okay, I have a hearing problem, so.
How did you meet your husband?
Oh.
My bad.
I met him in a bar. We were introduced by a policeman. Now that sounds really bad, but it really wasn't. I was dating a fellow teacher named Ron. And Ron was a sweetheart. He really was. He was very nice to me. But he was kind of a boring man. So my roommate, Sally, was at our apartment with the man that she was dating, one of the three she was dating, named Don. And I was complaining about Ron, and I said, oh, you know, he's so boring. And Don says, I know this guy you'd really like, Shirley. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. I said, you're always telling me this. Where is this guy I'd really like? Oh, I think he's at the bar. We just left. So we went to the bar, and I was introduced to him. And he was tall and thin, had beautiful blue eyes. And I sat next to him, which I did not go to bars much at all, really. And then he said to me, you seem like a nice girl, so I want to tell you that I'm divorced. And I thought, wow, that's really honest. I mean, he could have strung me along and never said anything. But of course, I was Catholic, and there's no way I was going to go out with a divorced man. But my roommate, who incidentally still lives in Visalia, said to me, oh, Shirley, go out with him. After all, you're not going to marry him. And I said, absolutely right. So there's no harm in going out with him. Well, the problem was, you know, with the divorce thing. And I did not want to have anything to do with this guy, except when he'd call me, I'd go out with him. And I said, this is totally wrong. This is totally wrong. I intended to marry somebody who was educated, somebody who was already in their profession, and somebody who treated me well. And she said to me, you're describing Ron. I said, I know, but I don't like Ron. I like Joe. Anyway, the book called Rocky Road is More Than a Candy Bar is the story. That's the one I was talking about earlier that I went back to. And that's the story of how we were going together and how we finally did become married. We were married in the Catholic Church, and we had to go through a long process. It took us 3 years, but we were determined to do it. My husband did become a Catholic, and so it, you know, and I think when you look at some of these things and the difficulties that occur, you know, you don't know what life is going to give you. And when it was my birthday, and well, I'll tell you another story. I had promised, when I was in college, a good friend of mine named Clyde, and I decided that we would go to Germany to see the Oberammergau Passion Play, which was a play about the last days, a depiction of Christ's last days on earth. And it's world famous, it's done every 10 years, so Clyde and I decided we would do that. Well, in the meantime, I was going with Joe. So I explained to him, you know, then I got engaged to Joe. So my mother, and I decided I would take my mother to Europe. So my mother says, you know, this isn't such a good idea, maybe you just got engaged, you're going off to Europe with us, and maybe you shouldn't go. So I went to my husband, and you know, he was to my boyfriend, and told him, you know, what was going on. And I said, so my mother thinks maybe I should cancel the trip. And he says, well, are you romantically inclined with this guy? And I said, no, he doesn't even like to go out with girls. And he said, well, if you don't go to Europe, I'm not going to marry you. And I said, what? He said, if you don't go to Europe, I'm not going to marry you. And I said, why? He said, because I don't want to spend the rest of my life hearing, if it hadn't been for you, I could have gone to Europe. Go, have a good time, tell me where you're going to be. And every time we were in a new country, I got a letter at the hotel from him telling me how much he missed me. He loved me. This guy is a keeper. I mean, he really was. We were married 56 years. He died 3 years ago. And he was really good about my writing. Somebody said it's very hard to be a writer, but it's really hard to be married to one because they're locked in their world so often. But anyway, that's in that book.
D'Angelo, you got a question?
Yeah. How many people gave you the stories that made up the...
You're gonna have
How many people did you put into the character Elena?
How many real people?
Yeah.
Oh, gee, I've never counted. Probably 15.
I have a question for you. In an interview, you said that one of the people you based Elena on went on to become the migrant education director at PUSD. Could you speak more about that?
Okay, yes. The book is titled Fall in Love with an Orchestra or a Book, and it came from one of my former students. She, when we were talking together, she came and we were discussing some things, and I was, talking to a lot of people to research the book. And she told me this. She says, my mother brought me here. They came legally, and she told me, I brought you to the best country in the world. Now you decide, fall in love with an orchestra or a book, work in the fields, or get an education. She got an education, became a teacher, and was ahead of the migrant education program. She isn't any longer. I'm not certain. She may even be retired. I haven't been in touch with her for a long time. But I thought that was such a wonderful title. And incidentally, the first time this book was sold to teenagers is when she was in charge of the summer program and bought 100 copies. And again, I was able to be there with the students. This is such a joy to me. You have no idea. I'm 86 years old, but I've got all these books in my head. I have to live to be 125. That's my target date. Okay, any other questions?
One last quick question from anybody? No?
Thank you very much for spending time with me. I really enjoy being around young people. I feed off your energy. It makes me excited. Thank you for reading my book. I hope that in some way what I've had to say today has an impact on your life, as my teachers have had an impact on me. And you're going to be out there, and you're going to be that person who's going to be there, who's going to be kind and generous and understanding, and feeling that, life is good when you do that. It makes you feel good as well as other people.
Thank you so much.